The American dream of owning a home making a comeback. President Trump is taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes and is calling on Congress to codify that into law. Shares of private equity firms initially took a hit on the news. This included Blackstone and Apollo, Invitation Homes. Home builders are recovering from the slide that we saw yesterday. We've got the perfect guest to break all of this down. I want to bring in U.S. Federal Housing Director William J. Pulte. Sir, it's great to see you, and thank you for joining us today.
Of course. Nice to see you.
So there's a lot to unpack with this post we got from President Trump, and a lot more questions about it, which I've got for you. But I was looking at some research from C.J. Patrick. In the second quarter of last year, large and small investors made up the highest share of home buyers in 5 years. So that is a problem for the American family. But then if you look at Blackstone, for instance, this is a company that stepped in during the 2008 financial crisis. Some are arguing they kept the housing market from a complete collapse. They're also the largest private equity owner of apartments in the U.S. Is Blackstone a target of the administration?
Look, what's a target of the administration is getting the American dream back on track after 4 years of Joe Biden destroying the housing market. The good news is we have a builder-in-chief, not just a commander-in-chief. He understands the real estate market. He understands the importance of keeping home prices high, but at the same time making it so that way people can finally afford a home again. During Biden's term of 4 years, you had massive inflation. Mortgage rates went through the roof. Nobody could afford a home. And the only people who could afford a home were these big corporations with balance sheets. So it's time that corporations stop owning these homes and people start owning and living in these homes as nature intended.
Well, the institutional investment community, though, they only really own about, the figures are about 2 to 3% of the housing stock across the country, but there is a concentration. And I wanted to ask you about this because
and it's growing. And it's growing, and not only is it growing, but you have a situation where they're actually buying homes at 20 to 30% less, in some cases, than some average Americans are. We can't be having this where corporations are getting deals on homes. Meanwhile, people can't even find shelter to live in. Anyway, sorry to interrupt, but it's just crazy.
Go right ahead, because that kind of leads to my next question with you. Are there certain markets that you're going to be targeting? Because GAO says that, their report found that about 1/4 of these homes in Atlanta, this is single-family rentals, it's a quarter of the stock in Atlanta, and it's about a fifth in Jacksonville and Charlotte. So there's a concentration there. Is that something that's on your radar?
Well, some cities have a big percentage, as you're saying, but it's frankly everywhere across the country. And for too long, these builders have been selling to these corporations. These corporations are using their balance sheet. It's time to put the American people first. I mean, imagine that. We have a president who's given a mandate. We're bringing down housing costs. We're bringing down the cost to afford a mortgage monthly. The mortgage rate when we got into office was 7%. President Trump has gotten that down into the low 6s. He's going to announce at Davos a bunch of new ideas that I think are really going to get the housing market going again. So I'm very confident we can resuscitate the housing market, but it's dead after what Joe Biden did, and we're bringing it back to life.
Are you working with President Trump? Because we do know that he is going to be addressing this in Davos in 2 weeks. What can you tell us?
It's a whole administration approach. President Trump is very dialed in on it, as is the vice president. That's been very fun to work with the vice president. This is a very big initiative for him. He's been doing an amazing job bringing everybody together, from HUD to Treasury to the economic team to commerce. This is an all-out effort. Look, Biden did incredible damage to not just the economy, but to the housing market. And if somebody gets out of college, they should be able to afford a home if they have a good job and they're, providing for themselves and their family one day. They need to be able to afford a home. People gave up hope the last 4 years, Cheryl. We can't have that happen, and that won't happen in President Trump's America.
In Davos, I'm assuming you're going to be accompanying the president. In Davos, you're going to have a lot of these Wall Street executives. You're going to have that crowd there. One CEO of Amherst actually said that the president's idea is anti-free market. It's anti-property rights. How do you respond to that?
No, I don't think that at all. In fact, I think what's happened has been, they've been using paper. They've been using very special paper, long-term debt, to buy these homes. And frankly, Americans don't have all of the benefits and the low cost that a lot of these corporations have. So if anybody, I think, has been unfairly treated by the Biden people and this whole inflation that we had, it's been the average American. So President Trump was given a mandate. He's the most popular president in history for a reason. People love him. They know he's looking out for them. And frankly, he finally had the ability to do something that, frankly, the Democrats didn't have the guts to do. You know, Elizabeth Warren, she goes around and she says all this nonsense about, oh, we don't like these institutional homes, but her and Biden didn't do anything about it. And then, boom, President Trump gets it done. So I'm very optimistic, frankly, about the trajectory of where we're headed.
Yeah, no, Elizabeth Warren, the senator, had said we would already have a road to housing passed if he was serious, and she was very critical of the president, to your point. But at the same time, you know, do you think that the president would need congressional approval for these changes?
Well, I think the president will do an executive action, as he had said, and then he'll also codify it with Congress. That's the intention. I do think that he wields enormous executive action, not just in this regard, but also in terms of the home builders and in terms of a bunch of other areas, which I'll leave for him to announce. But I will just say this. President Trump was almost bombarded by people who wanted him to sell this company, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, for $100 billion in his first term. And thank God he had the judgment to do that and hold on to it and not sell it, because now it's worth $500 billion, some say up to $1 trillion. And we have these two enormous assets. They're weapons. They're weapons to be able to help people get the affordable American dream again. And frankly, we have a president who knows they exist. I don't even think Joe Biden knew that these two companies, which I chair, exist. And so we're putting them back to life. And I think that you'll see some very exciting things come out here very shortly from the president.
Talk about an IPO. That's what you're mentioning here.
Well, I think I'll leave it to him to decide, you know, what he wants to disclose and when he wants to do it and whatnot. I just say this. Thank God we have a president who understands the real estate market. He understands the importance of keeping home prices up, but also innovating. And I think this, institutional ban is a first very, very good step to rectifying what's gone on the last 4 years.
Before you go, we do still have an incredible supply shortage here in this country. Is that going to be part of this or this announcement in Davos from the president and from you, or is this going to be a few steps to go?
Well, we're very focused on supply, and this gets back to the whole Fannie and Freddie conversation. Other presidents didn't even know it existed. So we're using Fannie and Freddie, and we're working with the builders. We prefer to work with them with a carrot instead of a stick. But look, we're keeping all options on the table. Fannie and Freddie have enormous power over the builders, and hopefully they do the right thing. We're really enjoying working with them constructively. So stay tuned on that front. But we got to get building again after these last 4 years, and we're going to do it. Well,
and certainly a part of that is, you know, there's a question mark about the tariffs, and the Supreme Court is likely going to rule on that Friday. Is there a plan in place if for some reason the tariffs are taken off the table?
Well, I would defer to the president's other economic team in terms of tariffs. In terms of the home builders, I just want to point out that a lot of people said, well, it's going to increase the cost of construction. Builders have come out and said that tariffs have not caused an increase in the cost of construction. So it is fairly interesting that the president has been dead right. Everybody said it would lead to this crazy inflation. It hasn't. It's in fact been the opposite. Tariffs have been a very, very good thing, and they've actually been a good thing for the construction market as well. Yeah,
I remember a year ago all the concern about lumber prices, and that's what I was thinking there. Well, Director Pulte, it's always great. It was
nonsense. Yeah. The president was right as always.
He was.
Trump is always right about everything.
Director Pulte, it's always great to speak with you. Come back soon, and we're really looking forward to Davos to hear what this big announcement's going to be.
Stay tuned.
All right, Director Will Pulte.